I think this narrative around safety is designed to sow fear and division. And I think it is true that there are many parts of this organizing that very genuinely make Jews uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know a lot of Jews who are uncomfortable with the word intifada. I know a lot of Jews that are uncomfortable will often use the word Gaza instead of using the word Palestine because they can't bring themselves to say the word Palestine because it feels like it delegitimizes the existence of the state of Israel or something like that. And so, or genocide even, you know, genocide is strange, you know, so inexplicably has become such a controversial word. So I think I totally understand and can see why some Jews that are kind of going through a political evolution in this moment are struggling with some of these ideas and phrases. And also being uncomfortable with the framing of a liberation movement is not the same thing as being unsafe.
Y'all ready? Don, you recording? Okay. Jake Levin interview, take 1. What's good, y'all? I am Donovan, and welcome to Stranger Fruit. We are blessed today to have Jake Levin here. He is a community organizer for the Jewish Left. What a title.
I think so.
What a time.
Yeah, what a time to be organizing in the Jewish left.
I know. So I like to give behind the scenes tea. I always love to do it. And so Jake is coming fresh off of a really, really crazy night here in New York where college students are protesting at universities all over New York. And Jake, as an organizer, has been involved in sort of like helping with these students and helping them get out of jail. And he's also been to jail himself. And so, not to tell all your business, but I'm putting it out there so that people can really understand that we are at a very specific time where being a community organizer is not only something that we do on social media at this moment, like it's happening in real time. So tell us about like what this experience has been like for you. We can start at October 7th, but I think it's more pertinent to talk about what you experienced last night.
Yeah.
So just to put it into context, so college students right now are protesting the genocide that's happening in Palestine. And they are very vocal about it. They've been organizing at Columbia. They're doing it at NYU. They're doing it in LA. They're doing it all over the country. And so New York is a hotbed. It kind of like started here. So what has that been like for you and what happened last night?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important maybe to take a little bit of a step back and start with what happened with the first encampment. You know, just in the last few weeks, I think the moral clarity and the voice of student organizers and activists has really come to the forefront of the conversation about Gaza. It started with an encampment at Columbia University and spread to a number of other campuses. And these are students who are involved with organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace, Students for Justice in Palestine, larger coalitions that are working to divest the university's resources from both military companies like Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, that are providing weapons to the U.S. government and also to the Israeli government, and also from companies that are on the boycott, divestment, and sanctions list that are supportive of the actions of the state of Israel. So there are a number of demands that students have been fighting for. A number of demands around the college's investments. At City College, they had 5 demands. So there's a really powerful movement callback to 1969 to the Harlem University strike, when students took over the campus at City College, as part of another movement for a number of things.
A fierce battle at City College. This was 50 years ago when students took over the Harlem campus.
The students here decided enough is enough, and we said that we demand open admissions.
More than 200 black and Puerto Rican students occupied 17 buildings beginning on April 22, 1969, closing the South Campus for 2 weeks. In a show of solidarity, white students took over the North Campus. Blacks and Puerto Ricans only made up 9% of the student body in 1969. Students thought that was outrageous since blacks and Puerto Ricans made up 40% of the city's high school graduates and nearly the entire Harlem community surrounding the college. The mayor agreed to the demands, opening City College and the City University to thousands of students who otherwise would not have been qualified for admission.
At that time, I was considering myself a black revolutionary. There was lots of stuff going on in the country around us. And we were a part of a movement that said that we could make a difference. They surrounded us down at the South Campus, and all their forces showed up in the school buses, and they had all their batons and their weapons. We were out there saying, "Off the pig!"
According to the Black Studies program, City College is now 53% Hispanic and Black.
They were organizing around the creation of a Black Studies department. They were fighting against repression of previous protest movements. They were anti-war protesters. And this current movement of students, of CUNY students from across the system, had five demands as well. And those demands include demilitarization of the campus, divestment from the military, and from any institutions affiliated with Israel, and other more specific demands like renaming the Colin Powell School.
Oh, wow.
Which is, there's a division at City College that is named after Colin Powell. And so one of their demands is the renaming of the Colin Powell School, along with a broader set of demands calling for a people's CUNY, which is fully funding our adjuncts, fully funding public university and public infrastructure, which has been consistently defunded over the last few decades. But primarily their demand has been to have all eyes on Gaza and to call out the genocide that's continuing to occur and the ways in which the university and our city and our country is complicit in the perpetuation of genocide of Palestinians in Gaza, and also calling out the occupation and the history of apartheid in Palestine. And so students set up an encampment at City College. They started on Thursday. I am not a City College student. I'm affiliated with City College, but I'm not a current student. And so last night, the college issued a statement that said they were going to try to clear the encampment by the start of classes today. And then they decided, a combination of CUNY Public Safety and the NYPD decided they were going to move in last night. They closed off the entire campus. There's a large protest outside the gates where police were extremely violent. And 45,000 people have been killed in Palestine. And the NYPD and the SRG are, brutalizing 19-year-olds in the street who are just trying to call for an end to this war. I think it's important that we think about and talk about what students are experiencing here. And also the students are reminding us that they are safe here in ways that no one in Palestine is experiencing safety in this moment. And police brutality and repression by the police is horrible and is real. And also, we also want to be careful about not equating that with not knowing whether your home is going to get bombed.
That's really thoughtful. That's really, really thoughtful, because when you look at the media right now, the media has completely shifted gears and talking about how undisciplined and how reckless and how irresponsible schools are for allowing these students to protest because they're out of control. They've been impacted by TikTok and they're just crazy terrorist-loving children at this point. And so I think like there is this tale of two worlds where students are doing something that they feel is very just. And it's based in the education that they paid so much to get that on media, if you wouldn't know any better, you would think that Harvard is the ghetto. You would think that, like these colleges are places where only the worst of us go. How do you feel about sort of like this, you're a community organizer and you're working to do this, and then the television and the media are working and they're going in a completely different opposite direction. And I appreciate that the students are actually bringing attention to this, because I think that they're using this as an opportunity not to cover Gaza.
Yes, right. And I think that's really important. I was at my family's Passover Seder last week, and my cousin is a student at Brown, and learned that he's been living in the student encampment at Brown. Wow. And I think the politics that my cousin and I share in our family is not necessarily representative of where a lot of the rest of my family members are.
Gotcha.
And so we connected and we're talking about that experience. And there was a moment where I was sitting with my cousin and his sister lives on the Upper West Side, right near Columbia. and was like, hey, I'm feeling really kind of, unsafe about being uptown around Columbia, and there's so much police presence, and things are really crazy right now. And like, I feel like, I totally support the protesters' demands. And also like, I'm just like feeling concerned about my own safety. And his brother her brother who's living in the encampment was like, that's fine. And that's okay that you're having that experience and that you're processing that here, and you should have space to process that. But we need to have all eyes on Gaza, and we need to be thinking about Gaza, and we need to be thinking about divest, and we need to be thinking about our demands. And the conversation moving to the point where it's talking about, and focusing on the students and the protests that are happening on campus, rather than what the protests are calling for and what the students are demanding, is I think a distraction from what's happening in Gaza. In the same way that the story around Iran, I think, turned into this conversation about these great powers that are fighting this. Israel and Iran are fighting this, and the West and Iran are fighting this war, and that also took the conversation away from Gaza.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, the conversation around Columbia and City College is also very different. So like City College and CUNY is a university made up of students that are by and large working class, by and large students of color,
true.
and have a lot more precarity and have a lot more on the line to show up and participate in protest movements than some Columbia students do. And so I think there's also this focus on this, the elite institution and the organizing that's happening at Columbia, which is extremely important and really powerful. And also, I think students that have a lot more on the line at City College and that are so brave and taking the risks that they've been taking is not getting the same amount of attention either.
Ooh, that's
so
a really great point. Not as many famous parents of children.
Exactly.
Right?
Not as many billionaire
associated.
donors. Yeah, exactly.
That is so true.
Right.
I think that's a great point. And speaking of, like, when you were talking about your family, this idea of feeling safe, are Gazans feeling really safe right now? It's kind of like...
Exactly.
Yeah, let's
right.
pay attention to the real shit. And I mentioned this before I was watching Joe Scarsborough, who gets on my fucking nerves, because it's kind of like when we look at the media and we look at the way that they are painting this right now. I would imagine that maybe it was the same during the Vietnam War. Maybe it's the same when, South African apartheid was happening. As it pertains to the media is concerned, where they're painting these students as like radical psychopaths who are terrorist lovers, versus students who tend to be on the right side of history and have a very rich history of pushing back on the government and using said education to be able to do so. Do you feel like this whole push that Scarsborough and others are saying that these are violent protests and they're, making people feel uncomfortable, especially Jewish students, have you found that to be at all meritable, like, in terms of, to have merit rather, while you're around campus?
No, I don't think so. And I don't think these protests have not felt unsafe to me at any moment. Last Friday night, the CUNY Gaza Solidarity Encampment had one of the most beautiful Shabbat dinners and little candle lighting ceremonies that I've ever been a part of. It was so gorgeous. It was a bunch of radical anti-Zionist Jews, Palestinian student organizers, people from all faiths and backgrounds coming together to participate and show solidarity in this ritual. And we said Jewish prayers, and we shared stories and histories of radical CUNY organizing in the past. It was someone who was like, my grandfather was suspended from CUNY for being a communist in the 40s.
Oh, wow.
And so, it's this beautiful coming together. And over the last 5 days, it's been teach-ins and movie screenings and craft workshops and sign painting and song circles and coordination meetings to figure out how to do mutual aid to bring in food and water. And like 2 moms from Westchester drove in with their SUV with a truck full of water, who is not a demographic, like white moms from Westchester is not the demographic that I might necessarily anticipate showing solidarity and support for the encampment, but they showed up with this water and donated a whole bunch and expressed a lot of solidarity and support. And then the president of the college released a statement that basically said, these are the most violent and unprecedented, violent protests our college has ever seen, which is just simply not true to anyone who's been in and around these protests. They've been sites of community and collaboration and solidarity and organization. And then another narrative is this outside agitator narrative, which has been used for years and years in this similar playbook of how to discredit movements.
Yes.
And saying like, oh, there are outside agitators that are actually the ones who are driving this movement. It's not actually CUNY students. It's not actually City College students. It's outside agitators. And there's none or very little evidence of that. Everyone who's been involved that I'm aware of is a CUNY person or a City College person for that particular encampment. So it's never felt unsafe. I think this narrative around safety is designed to sow fear and division. And I think it is true that there are many parts of this organizing that very genuinely make Jews uncomfortable. You know, I know a lot of Jews who are uncomfortable with the word intifada. I know a lot of Jews that are uncomfortable will often use the word Gaza instead of using the word Palestine because they can't bring themselves to say the word Palestine because it feels like it delegitimizes the existence of the state of Israel or something like that. And so, or genocide even, you know, genocide is strange, you know, so inexplicably has become such a controversial word. So I think I totally understand and can see why some Jews that are kind of going through a political evolution in this moment are struggling with some of these ideas and phrases. And also being uncomfortable with the framing of a liberation movement is not the same thing as being unsafe.
These are very different things.
Yeah.
And like, this is what's scary to me about this, because like you even just mentioned, you've witnessed this. It's very, very peaceful. You turn on the news, it's like chaos. They're taking over the world and they're gonna vote Trump in, and they're just, you know, they're these crazy teenagers who like have been on TikTok and like they're falling in love with Hamas. It's like this conversation is so different than even what I've been seeing on the internet. And then also I follow Zionist pages. I follow like anti-Zionist pages. I follow a whole host of people to make sure that I'm getting to see the variety of opinions. And I'm telling you, it's just so, these stark differences are insane. And it can be very difficult to be able to navigate this space, even the social media space, to really understand like what is actually happening. I'm wondering for you as an organizer, where, you know, you're on the ground, which is very different than being on social media and resharing a whole bunch of shit and building your following from being not on the ground, but being in the digital space. How has this been on you? I'm just like, now we're going back a little bit further, back towards October the 7th. As a Jewish person, how has this experience been for you? Because there are a couple of things that I can see. You'll tell me how you feel. One is that we witnessed on October 7th innocent folks being murdered and killed, and that is a catastrophe in and of itself. Then we've had people sort of take this situation and use it as an opportunity to learn about what's going on, and as a result of that, you have a lot of people who may not be showing, especially at this point, as much sympathy to Israelis, and I'm sure that can be painful for some people, or even painful for you. So I'm very curious to how you've navigated this experience as a Jewish man at this particular time, where I'm sure people have words to say to you about your work, being someone who's actively working with pro-Palestinian students, for example. What has it been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I have the pleasure of having been called a self-hating Jew for probably a decade or more now. I was really activated around Palestine in college. I went to Brooklyn College, and it was, there's a large Arab student population and there's a large Jewish student population, and the Jewish student population in general tends to be a little bit more conservative. It's a generalization, but I think it's accurate. And there were efforts by many on campus to try to ban or limit the actions of Students for Justice in Palestine. And I was really activated in that moment and was involved in the student government and part of a group that voted against defunding the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter and got a lot of pushback for that. And was written about in this Zionist Organization of America report. That was
they got
then
you
used.
In the report?
They got me in the report, which was then used, which I think is a really important point. This report talking about how CUNY is the most anti-Semitic, university in the country, which is absolute BS. Was then used by New York state legislators to try to defund CUNY, which in turn harms Jewish students. It's like you're trying to protect Jewish students by addressing anti-Semitism on campus. The way to do that is not by reducing funding to our largest public university system, and to making it more difficult for people to get a public education. So there's the connection between this kind of instrumentalization of anti-Semitism and the funding of our public institutions, which I think is a really important conversation. You can bracket that. But as someone who's been involved in organizing around Palestine for a long time, I was in Gaza in 2017, have been to the West Bank a number of times. A lot shifted after October 7th. It is absolutely the case that the attack by Hamas was horrible and unconscionable, and I believe that any demand for Palestinian liberation should involve the freedom of everyone and the liberation of everyone, which includes the return of the hostages. And also, I think it's important to see October 7th in the context of a much longer history of occupation and apartheid. That this is not an isolated incident that came out of nowhere. This is the result of decades and decades of oppression and marginalization that Palestinians have experienced. The organizing that we've been doing, I've been arrested a number of times over the last few months. I've mostly been participating and organizing Jewish anti-Zionist-led actions. I organize with Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, and have also done some organizing with Jewish Voice for Peace and some other organizations. If not now, has also been very active. But I think it's really important that there's work that Jews and Jewish organizations should be doing in this moment that has overlap with the work that Palestinian organizations are doing in this moment. And I think we need to be showing up in solidarity and in coordination with and listening to the demands of Palestinian-led organizations, and not being afraid to be bold in following the leadership of Palestinian voices in this moment. And also, there's a whole universe of work that Jews need to be doing with other Jews, including talking to our family, talking to our friends, figuring out ways to create openings for conversation with Jews who might not be as progressive on Palestine as maybe I believe that they should be or could be. And it's about having those conversations and helping open people up to some of these ideas. And I think, the idea of radical diasporism has always been really important in my understanding of my own family and of our lives here. As a Jew, New York is my home. My family are Eastern European Jews that came from Russia and from Poland to New York City. I have no connection to Israel. I don't identify with it as my homeland. I have no desire to make Aliyah and move there. I live in the diaspora, and Jews have thrived for thousands of years in the diaspora. That's not to say that concerted efforts to attack and kill Jews and anti-Semitism over the course of thousands of years is not real. It is very real, and it is very real now. And we need to be talking about and thinking about that. And also, I think I'm fundamentally not interested in nation building, in state building as a project. I'm interested in solidarity and living together and building communities that look a lot like New York City, where we all have an opportunity to live together and struggle together and fight with one another and figure out what it means to live on top of one another, and that's how you build beautiful, beloved community.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to go back to the anti-Semitism piece, which you said that is a real current threat. And I want to just highlight this point because what I have noticed and what I'm fearful of is that while there's a lot of conflation going on with Zionism and Judaism, is that it leads to a space where people will have aggression towards people who identify as Jewish, who have nothing to do with the state of Israel, or maybe don't have the same attachment, or maybe just simply believe like Jewish people deserve or should have a place to go and to call home because of what Jewish people have gone through. Now, I will say as a Black person, I wish if there was some place that we can just roll up on and just be cool and calm and everybody knows to leave us the fuck alone. I don't even know what that experience is like, but do I think that we deserve that? Yes. Do I think that Jewish people deserve that? Yes, because white supremacy does not take a day off.
That's right.
But what I'm concerned about is that peace-loving Jewish people and Jewish people everywhere are now being put in a place where anti-Semitism as a phrase that we've defined and we've gotten to know is being watered down, is being sort of like put out there for people to just throw arrows at in a way that puts people in danger. Do you ever worry about the fact that Zionism is being conflated with Judaism and therefore puts Jewish people at risk?
Yes, I do worry about that. I feel like the thing that has made me less safe over the last 6 months and longer is the fact that violence is being perpetuated in my name. The fact that Israel as a state that is, the Jewish state, is perpetuating and committing genocide is actually what makes me less safe and more vulnerable. Is for someone to say, oh, because you're Jewish, you must be associated with Israel, you must be a Zionist, therefore you're dangerous, therefore you're a threat. That state that claims to represent you, or that does represent you, if someone believes that, is committing all of these horrible things in your name, or in the idea of protecting you. I think that makes me unsafe. Anti-Semitism is very real, and there's a lot of indications that anti-Semitism has actually been on the rise. That isolated attacks and incidents of anti-Semitism have been on the rise. And whether that's attributed to some of what I was just describing around people reacting to the actions of the state of Israel, or whether they're related to kind of a more individualistic hatred or dislike of Jews. I think there's probably more research to be done to bear that out. But it is real. And also at the same time, I think it's really important that we don't exceptionalize Jews. I think the way that we all stay safe is through solidarity and through recognizing that the structures of white supremacy and of this deranged form of capitalism that we're in right now, like
very deranged.
It's so deranged. That's what's keeping us all down, right? And that's what's making it hard for all of us to thrive. Like when we have an opportunity to say, okay, there are very real, I think we need to talk about the assimilation of Jews into whiteness, and the ways in which whiteness has allowed Jews to assimilate and to, reach certain levels of success in society, and also the ways in which whiteness keeps all of us divided, and the ways that white supremacy keeps us from having a shared struggle. Yeah. Because I think we can have, we can have beautiful things. We can have transit systems at work. We can have education systems at work. We can have healthcare for all. And I genuinely believe that if we all recognize that the oppression and the marginalization that we experience, that while they're not the same, and we shouldn't equate what a particular community is experiencing with what another community is experiencing. There are threads that make it possible for all of us to connect our struggles to one another and to fight to build a better world. And when we make exceptions for certain marginalized or minority groups and kind of do this model minority thing, like there's this grant, I think the city council put out some funding for hate violence prevention. But the only two hates that it was allocated toward was anti-Semitism and anti-Asian hate.
Oh, wow.
That's it. And so it's, like, what does that mean? Like, what is that doing, or what is that saying when we say that, like, these two hates matter more than other hates, than, like, anti-Black violence, or than, like the violence, anti-queer violence,
these coins,
exactly. But specifically for the Jews and for Asian folks, and it's like, anti-Semitism and anti-Asian hate are both real and both matter. And also, I think we need to just, like, be a little curious about, and a little skeptical about, like, okay, what is it doing, or what does it mean that those hates are, those hates are made acceptable?
Yeah, so we need to really be skeptical of this. And, like, one of the things that we were talking about before, because we did a show a long time ago, we were talking about the relationship between the Black and the Jewish community on the Grapevine. It never aired because it was a lot. But one of the things that you had mentioned in the conversation was that you said the reason why we're in a lot of this space is because of the American and Israel relationship. And this may be a hard question, but I'm interested to know, in your perspective, how do you feel about this idea of the Jewish state as it is? Excuse me, because I don't even want to call it the Jewish state, because I know that you use that language, but I want to just call it Israel for now. So Israel and Israel's right to exist. I was having a conversation with a Zionist, and she said that before Israel will give up itself and say, like, fine, it's fine, we'll just give it up, everybody can share it, we'll just be called something else. She said there will be nuclear war. I'm interested to know about, how do you feel about the state of Israel and its right to exist as it exists now? Is there a world in your mind where Israel does not exist, or Israel is now a free Palestine, or everybody's in one state? Now, these are different things, but I'm just interested over this general idea of Israel and where it is and how it is now, and can it be this? Because it doesn't seem to want to change.
Yeah. These are the big questions.
I know.